I was very unhappy where my career was going, and I could see it going on this path that I was like, that's not what I planned. And that's what everyone else thinks that I can do.
She was supposed to be the next great Hollywood star, the kind of actress people build entire films around, the kind of face that makes studio executives see dollar signs and critics reach for words like luminous and transcendent. In 1992, Virginia Madsen stood on a stage and accepted a Golden Globe nomination for her work in a film that should have changed everything. She wore a dress that cost more than her first car. She smiled for cameras that had mostly ignored her for years. And then she went home to an apartment she could barely afford in a career that had somehow already peaked and crashed twice, to wait for a phone that wouldn't ring for another 12 years. This is not a story about an actress who never made it. This is about an actress who made it 3 separate times and watched Hollywood forget her 3 separate times. And the cruelest part is that Virginia Madsen did everything right. The first time people noticed Virginia Madsen, she was playing a woman who didn't exist. It was 1984. She was 23 years old, cast in the science fiction epic directed by David Lynch opposite Kyle MacLachlan in a film that would become a cult masterpiece decades later, but arrived in theaters like a beautiful, incomprehensible disaster. Dune was supposed to be the film that mattered. Instead, it became the film people apologized for loving. But here's what nobody talks about when they revisit Dune. Virginia Madsen is the first thing you see. Her face fills the screen in extreme close-up. She narrates the entire universe into existence. She is the voice of authority, the entry point, the oracle. For a young actress with almost no credits, this should have been a coronation. Instead, it became a warning about what happens when you're tied to someone else's vision and that vision fails. She didn't get blamed for the movie, she just got forgotten with it. Hollywood has a very specific way of treating actresses who arrive too beautiful and too talented at the same time. It pretends it knows what to do with them. It puts them in everything, and then it puts them in nothing that matters. After Dune, Virginia Madsen worked constantly. She appeared in Electric Dreams. She starred in Creator opposite Peter O'Toole. She took roles in thrillers, in comedies, in horror films, in studio pictures that came and went without anyone noticing she'd been in them. She was always good. She was always striking. And she was always replaceable. By the late 80s, she'd done something very dangerous for a young actress trying to be taken seriously. She'd become the girl in the poster, the fantasy object, the beautiful woman the hero desires but doesn't quite see. She appeared in Hot to Trot opposite a talking horse. She starred in The Hot Spot opposite Don Johnson, a film drenched in sex and sweat and the kind of male gaze direction that made her look like an oil painting instead of a person. Critics noticed her body. They rarely mentioned her choices. This is where the trap closed the first time. Here's the thing Virginia Madsen understood earlier than most. Hollywood will let you be decorative forever. It will never stop hiring you to be the object in someone else's story. What it won't do is let you be complicated, not unless you force it. So she started saying no. In the early 90s, she turned down roles that would have paid well. She rejected scripts that wanted her to take her clothes off and say 3 lines. She waited for something that would let her act, not just appear. And while she waited, the phone slowed. Then it stopped. People assume actors disappear because they fail. Virginia Madsen disappeared because she refused to succeed on the terms being offered. But stop here for a moment, because this is where most people misunderstand her story. Virginia Madsen did not retreat into obscurity quietly. She did not give up, move away, or fade into bitterness. She kept working. She took smaller roles. She did television. She appeared in independent films nobody saw. She showed up on sets where the catering was bad and the trailers didn't have air conditioning. She stayed ready. And that's the detail almost everyone misses. She didn't disappear. Hollywood stopped looking. For 12 years, Virginia Madsen lived in a kind of professional purgatory. She worked just enough to stay afloat, She auditioned for roles that went to younger actresses, cheaper actresses, actresses whose names tested better with audiences who didn't remember Dune or The Hot Spot or any of the films that were supposed to make her a star. She was in her late 30s. In Hollywood, that's the age when actresses are told they've aged out of being the romantic lead and haven't aged into being the mother. It's the age when you're supposed to accept smaller ambitions. Madsen refused. In 2004, she got a call about a tiny independent film shooting in California wine country. The director was Alexander Payne. The role was a middle-aged woman named Maya, a waitress and wine enthusiast who had been hurt by love and had decided to protect herself by expecting nothing. It was a supporting part. It paid almost nothing. The shoot would take weeks. Madsen said yes immediately. Sideways was not supposed to be a cultural phenomenon. It was a small, talky, melancholy road movie about two men spiraling through midlife crises in very different directions. Paul Giamatti played a depressive failed novelist. Thomas Hayden Church played a washed-up actor trying to get laid one last time before his wedding, and Virginia Madsen played the woman who sees through all of it. Her character Maya has one scene in particular that changed everything. She sits across from Giamatti in a dimly lit room and delivers a monologue about why she loves wine. It's a speech about time and patience and the idea that something can be beautiful and fleeting and worth savoring even if it doesn't last. She performs it with such quiet, radiant intelligence that the audience forgets she's acting. She becomes the soul of the film. When Sideways premiered at film festivals, critics singled her out. When it was released theatrically, audiences fell in love with her. When award season arrived, she was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress. She was 43 years old. She had been a working actress for 2 decades, and suddenly Hollywood remembered her name. This should have been the turning point, the moment where everything changes, the comeback story where the actress who was overlooked finally gets her due and rides that Oscar nomination into a new phase of prestigious, high-profile work. But that's not what happened. Virginia Madsen did not win the Oscar. Cate Blanchett won for The Aviator, and while Madsen's performance in Sideways was widely celebrated, it did not make her a priority. It made her respectable. There's a difference. In the years following Sideways, she worked steadily again. She appeared in The Number 23 opposite Jim Carrey. She had a recurring role on CSI Miami. She starred in smaller films, television movies, guest spots on procedural dramas. She was hired. She was professional. She was good. But she was not the lead. She was not the name above the title. She was the actress people recognized and respected, but didn't build projects around. Hollywood had given her a second look. It just hadn't changed its mind about what she was worth. Look at this from her side. You spend your 20s being told you're going to be a star. You spend your 30s being forgotten. You spend your 40s proving yourself all over again, earning an Oscar nomination, receiving praise from some of the best directors in the business. And then you spend your 50s watching younger actresses get the roles you would have been perfect for, because the industry has decided that your moment has passed. Not because you weren't talented, not because you weren't dedicated, but because Hollywood has never known what to do with women who don't fit neatly into the narrow window it creates for them. Virginia Madsen's career is not a tragedy, but it is a blueprint for how the industry wastes actresses. In recent years, Madsen has spoken more openly about what it was like to be sidelined, forgotten, and then briefly remembered before being sidelined again. She's talked about auditioning for roles and being told they were too old, or not old enough, or not what they were looking for, which is Hollywood code for we've already decided on someone else. She's talked about watching male actors her age continue to play romantic leads, action heroes, complex anti-heroes, while women her age are cast as mothers, therapists, or ghosts. She's also talked about something harder to quantify: the psychological cost of being good at something the world doesn't value the way it should. Because Virginia Madsen is still a phenomenal actress, she's still working, she still brings depth and intelligence and presence to everything she does. And yet most people, if they think of her at all, think of her as that actress from Sideways, as if 2 decades of work before that and 2 decades after it don't count. Here's what really happened to Virginia Madsen. She didn't flame out. She didn't sabotage herself. She didn't make the wrong choices or fail to show up. She did everything an actress is supposed to do. She was talented, disciplined, professional, and patient. What happened to her is what happens to almost every actress who isn't given the roles that match her abilities at the exact moment Hollywood decides she's valuable. She got older, and Hollywood spent decades pretending that was the same thing as becoming less. There's a moment in Sideways, near the end, where Maya reads a letter that Giamatti's character left for her. In it, he tries to explain why he behaved the way he did, why he ran, why he couldn't let himself be loved. And Maya, standing alone in her apartment, finishes reading and sets the letter down. She doesn't cry. She doesn't rage. She simply absorbs it. You can see in her face that she understands him completely. And that understanding doesn't fix anything. That's the kind of performance Virginia Madsen has been giving for 40 years. Quiet, intelligent, heartbreaking. The kind of work that doesn't announce itself but lingers long after the scene ends. The tragedy is not that she stopped being great. It's that greatness for actresses has never been enough. Virginia Madsen is 63 years old now. She still works. She appears in television series, streaming films, independent projects that most people will never hear about. She shows up. She delivers. She does the job. And every so often, someone rediscovers Sideways and remembers how brilliant she was. They wonder why she didn't become a bigger star. They ask what happened. The answer is simple. Nothing happened to Virginia Madsen. Everything happened around her. Hollywood built a system that briefly celebrated her, then moved on, then briefly celebrated her again, then moved on again. She survived it. But survival in Hollywood is not the same as victory. She deserved the career they gave to someone else. If you want to understand how the industry treats women who refuse to disappear, look no further than the actress who was nominated for an Oscar at 43 and spent the next 20 years proving she was still worth watching. Hollywood just wasn't interested in looking. Some stories end in scandal, others end in silence. Hers ended in work. Steady, excellent, unnoticed work. And maybe that's the saddest kind of ending there is. If Hollywood's ghost stories interest you, wait until you hear what happened to Bridget Fonda, or why Greta Scacchi vanished at the height of her power. The industry has a graveyard full of actresses it forgot to remember.